Human shielded an alien girl from the shattering rain. Her salute after was soft, not formal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The first thing Ethan Cole noticed was the sound, a delicate tinkling that reminded him of glass ornaments colliding in a soft breeze. Out here, on the open flats of Telar Five, the shattering rain wasn't dangerous in the violent sense, but each tiny crystal droplet carried enough impact to crack equipment screens and sting exposed skin with a cold, sharp reminder that this planet followed no Earth weather rules. The sky above him rippled with soft violet light as another wave of crystal rain drifted in, swirling like powdered ice. His suit's visor warned of reduced visibility, and the helmet's mic crackled with static as he tried to recalibrate it. He was a simple field engineer sent to survey mineral clusters, not a storm runner, and he kept telling himself he'd be back at base before the next drift reached him. That was when he saw her. A small figure standing on an outcropping of pale stone, her posture rigid but her movements telling a different story. Kayla Saren, one of the young alien trainees assigned to monitor atmospheric readings, was trying, and failing, to shield the delicate data slate in her hands as the drifting crystals bounced off its surface. Even from a distance, Ethan could see her frustration in the way her silver-blue skin tightened around her jawline and her hair, soft and shimmering like strands of moonlit metal, fluttered under the rising wind. Another swirl of sparkling rain curled down from the cloud bank, heavier than before, and she flinched when the first cluster hit her shoulder. It wasn't painful, not truly, but the tapping cold of it made her stumble back a half step. Ethan didn't think. He just moved. His boots slid across the smooth stone as he jogged toward her, his gloved hand raised to block the drifting crystals while his other arm angled the outer panel of his gear pack above her like a makeshift umbrella. The rain tapped lightly against the pack, scattering in harmless cascades. Kayla blinked up at him, startled, her violet eyes reflecting the violet sky. "Human," she murmured, her voice soft but steady. "You did not have to do that." Ethan managed a small smile. "You look like you needed a shield. I had one." She studied him for several seconds, her expression unreadable, the crystals whispering around them with gentle chimes. When the drift finally thinned, she straightened, brushing a few shimmering particles from her tunic. Then something unexpected happened. She lifted her hand to her chest, not in the sharp, formal salute of her academy, but in a gentle gesture, palm pressed lightly over her heart before she dipped her head once. Her version of a quiet thank you. Ethan stood still, the moment settling over them like the fading rain, delicate, surprising, and softer than the sky above. The soft gesture Kayla offered lingered in Ethan's mind long after the crystal rain faded into the distance. The sky above the flats shifted from violet to a pale lavender, a sign that the next drift was at least a few minutes away. Ethan lowered his gear pack and let his shoulders relax, feeling the faint sting where earlier crystals had tapped against his suit. Kayla stood quietly beside him, her silver-blue skin catching the muted light, the subtle shimmer across her cheeks almost like a reflection of the sky itself. She studied the horizon, her brows drawing together as if reading something invisible in the air. Ethan glanced at her data slate. "Is it damaged?" he asked. She tapped it gently, producing a soft chime from the thin crystal surface. "Barely. These readings are sensitive to cold impact, but I can recover most of them. You arrived at the right time." Her tone carried no arrogance, only observation, which surprised him. In the few days since he had arrived on Telar Five, the alien cadets had mostly kept their distance, polite but guarded. Kayla had barely spoken to him during the orientation meeting, her eyes sharp and her posture straight as a steel beam. Now she looked different, warmer. Maybe it was just the light. A soft breeze carried fine particles across the ground, shifting them into delicate ripples like sand dunes sculpted by breath alone. Kayla tucked the slate under her arm and tilted her head. "Why were you out here alone? Your survey markers are closer to the western ridge." "My tracker glitched again." I was trying to reset it manually, Ethan said. Should have stopped when the visor started fogging, but I did not want to fall behind on my samples. She gave a small, thoughtful nod. Humans push themselves in quiet ways I do not always understand. Her gaze dropped to the faint scratch on his gauntlet. You were not shielded properly during the drift. I have had worse weather, he replied lightly. Kayla's expression shifted, almost like she wanted to disagree, but was unsure how. Instead, she stepped past him and inspected the nearby rock formation. Her hand hovered an inch from the surface, tracing the patterns without touching. This stone carries resonance lines. It sings when the rain hits. That is why the drift gathers here. Ethan moved closer, listening. At first, all he heard was the wind, but then there it was, a faint humming inside the rock, as if the ground held a quiet melody. You hear that every day? Most cadets tune it out. I never could, she admitted. The older officers say it is a distraction. Ethan smiled. Sounds more like talent. For the first time, she looked directly at him, her violet eyes steady and unguarded. You speak plainly for someone who does not know our customs. Or maybe I just say what I see, he said. Another drift glimmered in the distance, the sky flickering like a shaken snow globe. Kayla lifted her slate and scanned the air, her voice calm but firm. We should head toward the ridge shelter. The next wave will be stronger. Ethan nodded and adjusted his pack. As they started walking side by side, the approaching shimmer casting dancing lights across the flats, he noticed Kayla subtly adjusting her pace to match his stride. A simple thing, but meaningful in a place where every gesture mattered. The quiet between them was not empty anymore. It was comfortable, like a shared space under a sky that had stopped feeling so foreign. The ridge shelter was still half a mile ahead, a low arc of metallic stone built into the landscape, its surface reflecting the lavender sky like a muted mirror. Ethan kept his pace steady, the crunch of crystal dust under his boots blending with the thin whistle of wind weaving through the flats. Beside him, Kayla held her data slate against her chest to protect the fragile sensors, her posture precise but her expression softer than before. The next drift shimmered far off, a slow-moving curtain of crystal particles drifting like weightless snow. Ethan watched it with a quiet respect. On Telar Five, storms did not roar or rage. They whispered. They were beautiful and dangerous in the same breath. Kayla scanned the air currents again, her voice drifting toward him without looking away from the readings. This wave will fall at an angle. If we stay on this path, the drift will pass behind us. Ethan nodded. At least it gives us time. She glanced at him, a faint crease forming between her brows. You adapt quickly for someone who is not familiar with this terrain. I listen, he said. Usually helps me avoid trouble. A hint of amusement lifted the corner of her mouth. Is that what you consider trouble? Weather. Weather on this planet, yes. Her laugh was quiet, almost like she had not meant for it to escape. They continued over the polished stone bed, Kayla stepping lightly, Ethan adjusting when the ground tilted under a thin layer of frost-like crystals. Ahead, a cluster of tall mineral spires rose from the ground, their translucent surfaces catching the fading light and scattering it into soft arcs of color. Kayla slowed as they approached the first one. These spires form naturally, she explained. They hold resonance lines just like the ridge stone. When the drift hits, they glow. Ethan ran his palm across the cool surface. Like wind chimes you can see instead of hear. Her eyes brightened just slightly. Yes, my instructor said that same thing once. She paused, then added, he did not stay on our team. Ethan sensed there was more behind her words, but he did not press. Instead, he tilted his head toward the shelter visible beyond the spires. We should keep moving. The lights from the next drift are getting brighter. Kayla followed his gaze. The sky was beginning to shimmer again, purple glints flickering like fireflies across a vast curtain of falling particles. She shifted her slate under her arm and matched his pace. As they drew closer to the shelter, the hum of automated sensors reached them, a soft tone carried through the air. The protective canopy shimmered faintly, marking the safe zone. Ethan exhaled with relief. Kayla looked back at the approaching drift, her expression contemplative. You reacted very quickly earlier, she said quietly. You did not hesitate at all. Ethan shrugged, feeling the faint chill as the wind brushed his cheek. You were in the open. I had a shield. That was enough reason. She studied him, searching for something in his tone, then lowered her gaze with a small, thoughtful nod. You say things as if they are simple, she murmured. But I think they are not simple for most people. They stepped under the shelter just as a soft glow rippled across the spires behind them, signaling the leading edge of the drift. Kayla turned to face the light, her hair lifting slightly with the shifting air. Ethan stood a quiet step beside her. The wind outside carried the rising whisper of crystal rain, turning the entire horizon into a slow, shimmering wave. Inside the shelter, the silence felt different now. Not empty. Shared. The glow outside the ridge shelter deepened as the drift settled over the flats, each falling crystal catching the fading light and turning the world into a slow-moving curtain of violet shimmer. Inside the shelter, the air felt warmer, steadied by the soft hum of the protective canopy. Ethan eased his gear pack to the ground and instinctively checked the seals on his suit, brushing away a few remaining particles clinging to the fabric. Kayla stood near the entrance, her gaze fixed on the spires outside. The crystals striking their surfaces created a gentle ringing tone, almost like a distant choir made of glass. Ethan listened in silence, letting the sound wash over him. Kayla finally turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. When the drift falls like this, she said softly, our elders say it reminds them of the night songs. He raised an eyebrow. Night songs. They are stories we whispered during the cold months, she explained. Songs meant to reassure young trainees who feel overwhelmed when they first begin field duties. Ethan smiled. So, bedtime stories for cadets? Her eyes glimmered with amusement. If you wish to interpret it that way. She walked farther into the shelter, placing her data slate onto a small recessed platform so it could synchronize with the embedded sensors. The screen flickered with soft purple numbers. Her posture relaxed as she monitored the readings. Ethan watched her work, noticing how carefully she moved, each gesture precise, almost graceful. She looked different than she had that morning. Less guarded, less distant. You did very well out there, he said. Kayla paused. I stumbled in the open. A proper cadet should not. You slipped because the ground was glass, Ethan replied. Anyone would have. She considered his words, then nodded slowly as if trying them on for size. In our academy, falling is not encouraged. Ethan chuckled. It is not encouraged on Earth either. People just do it anyway. Another quiet laugh escaped her, softer than the first. She leaned one hand against the curved shelter wall, the faint glow of the canopy reflecting off her silver blue skin. When the drift hit earlier, she said, I thought I could manage it. I believed I had calculated the angle correctly. Ethan stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. You would have managed it eventually. I just sped up the timeline. Kayla looked up at him, something unreadable in her eyes. Humans do that, she murmured. Act quickly. Move before thinking. I am still learning how to observe that without assuming recklessness. Not reckless, he said. Just responsive. Her gaze softened. Yes, responsive. That is the correct word. Outside, the crystals continued to whisper against the spires, their shimmering reflections dancing along the shelter walls. Kayla reached for her slate again, checking the data stream. Ethan noticed a subtle tremble in her hands. Not fear, more like lingering tension. You are cold, he said gently. She blinked once, surprised. I am not accustomed to extended exposure during drifts. My training has been limited to simulations. Ethan unlatched the insulation wrap from his pack and offered it. Here. She hesitated, eyes shifting from the wrap to his face. Are you certain? Take it, he said. I will be fine. She accepted it slowly, her fingers brushing his in a light, cool touch before she wrapped the thin material around her shoulders. Thank you, Ethan. The way she said his name held a quiet sincerity that settled between them like the settling drift outside. The whispering crystals softened, and for a moment, the shelter felt like a small island in an ocean of shimmering calm. Kayla stood beside him, watching the glowing spires. She did not speak, and she did not need to. The silence carried its own meaning, gentle and steady, like the soft hum of the shelter walls around them. The drift outside began to thin, its shimmering fall shifting from a steady curtain to scattered trails that drifted across the sky like stray sparks. Ethan watched the glow fade from the spires one by one, each flickered dimming as the crystals lost momentum. Inside the shelter, the air felt calmer, the hum of the canopy steady and warm. Kayla adjusted the insulation wrap around her shoulders, the soft fabric catching hints of the purple light. She settled near the center console, where her data slate continued syncing with the shelter systems. Ethan stood beside her, leaning lightly against the curved wall, letting the quiet moment settle. After a few breaths, Kayla spoke without looking up. I have not spent much time in the field with humans. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Is that good or bad? Neither, she said. Just unfamiliar. She touched the slate to expand a display of drifting patterns, the soft holographic light painting her face in faint blue. Humans observe differently. You react to subtle cues that our cadets often overlook. He tilted his head. Examples. Earlier, she said, lifting her eyes toward him. You noticed my hands were cold even though I said nothing. Ethan shrugged. It seemed obvious. Not to everyone, she replied softly. Even among my own people. The way she said it carried a quiet hesitation, like someone stepping close to a memory they were unsure they wanted to examine. Ethan did not pry. Instead, he crouched beside the workstation to check the heater relay, making sure the shelter's power sources were stable. The indicator lights glowed evenly. Everything is holding, he said. We can stay here until the next drift passes completely. Kayla nodded and lowered her slate. Your presence is settling, she said in a tone that almost sounded like surprise. You speak calmly. You move gently. It creates stillness in a place that is rarely still. Ethan sat back on the floor, legs stretched out, and looked toward the entrance where the last traces of crystal rain shimmered in the fading light. I grew up near snow, he said. When it fell, the world went quiet. Everything slowed. It always felt smaller, but safer. She considered his words, then quietly replied, I have never seen snow. Only simulations. They say it falls without sound. It does, Ethan said. Though if you listen close, there is this hush that comes with it. A kind of peace that is hard to explain. Her eyes softened at that, and she shifted a little closer, drawn by the calm in his voice. The subtle movement made the wrap rustle gently. Outside, the drift slowed to a faint haze, the glow shifting into soft twilight colors across the sky. Kayla watched it, then asked in a low tone, Why did you come to Telar Five, Ethan? Truly. He hesitated only for a breath. I wanted a clean start, he said. A place where things were simple again. Where I could work with my hands and see the results right in front of me. She looked at him with quiet curiosity. And has that been true? Ethan let out a small laugh. Not yet, but today came close. The answer seemed to settle something inside her. She lowered her gaze, her expression softening. Then I am glad I met you on this survey, she said. Even if our paths crossed because of the drift. Outside, the last crystal fell, a faint shimmer against the stone. The world grew still, the quiet between them filling the shelter with a gentle warmth that felt almost like the beginning of trust. The last of the drift haze dissolved into the evening air, leaving the ridge shelter wrapped in a muted calm that felt almost unreal after the shimmering weight of the storm. The sky had shifted into soft bands of indigo and pale silver, and the mineral spires outside no longer glowed but stood quiet like tall, translucent pillars frozen in a moment of rest. Inside the shelter, Ethan checked the heater panel one more time, ensuring the power cells were still stable. A faint warm breeze circulated through the chamber, carrying the subtle scent of metallic stone and cold crystal dust. Kayla sat beside the data console, the insulation wrapped still around her shoulders, though she now held it loosely as if she no longer needed it for warmth. Her gaze lingered on the readings before she finally spoke. The survey team will not expect us back until after nightfall, she said. We have time before the next wave. Ethan nodded, lowering himself to sit across from her. Are the readings salvageable? She tapped the slate and watched the columns of data realign. Most of them. A few were distorted by the earlier impact, but I can reconstruct the patterns. It will just take patience. You seem good at that, Ethan said. Patience. Her eyes lifted toward him, soft and reflective. I used to believe so, but lately I question it. Ethan waited, giving her room to continue if she wished. Kayla's fingers traced the edge of the slate, almost absent-minded. In our academy, expectations are very precise. You carry yourself a certain way. You speak with control. You never show uncertainty. The moment you falter, even slightly, it becomes a mark that follows you. Sounds like a lot to carry, Ethan said. Especially in a place like this. It is, she admitted. And when I stumbled in the drift earlier, even though the ground caused it, I felt it. That familiar weight. Ethan leaned back, resting his arms on his knees. Everyone stumbles, Kayla. That is part of learning. She looked at him with a gentle but searching expression. You say it so simply. That is why it is difficult for me to understand. To you, stumbling is not a flaw. It is a moment. He thought about that. Maybe because I have had a lot of moments, he said with a small smile. Enough to realize they are not the end of anything. Kayla considered that quietly, her gaze lowering in thought. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was reflective, like standing in the stillness after fresh snow. Outside the shelter, the dim light of the fading day cast long shadows across the stone. The temperature dropped a few degrees, and the air shimmered faintly with the planet's natural ionization, creating soft ripples in the atmosphere. Kayla shifted closer to the entrance, watching the horizon. Ethan, she said after a moment. Earlier today, when the drift fell and you came toward me, did you not think the crystals would cause you harm? I thought they might, he said honestly. But you were in the open, and my gear pack was large enough to cover both of us. It just seemed like the right move. She held his gaze for a long moment, her eyes deep with something that had not been there before. Not admiration, not awe, but recognition. Among my people, she said softly, we are taught to help. When called. But you helped without being called. Ethan shrugged lightly. Sometimes you do not wait. You just move. Kayla stepped closer, her voice quiet but steady. That is what I still do not understand. But I want to. The shelter hummed gently around them, the soft warmth brushing against their faces as the sky outside darkened into a calm, star-flecked indigo. In the shared stillness, something subtle shifted between them, not spoken and not defined, but real and steady, like the first quiet breath before night fully settles. Night settled slowly across the ridge, the sky deepening into a soft indigo that shimmered with faint streaks of silver drifting high above the flats. The shelter hummed with steady warmth, a quiet pulse that echoed against the stone walls. Ethan felt the calm of it, the way the stillness wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Kayla stood near the entrance, her eyes trained on the horizon where the next drift line formed a faint shimmer, still far, but moving in a direction that puzzled her. She lifted her data slate and scanned the air currents again. The readings flickered in uneven patterns, unusual for the region. This is not the scheduled drift, she murmured. Ethan stepped closer. Meaning what? Meaning it should not be here, she said. Drifts follow stable paths unless something alters the atmospheric layer. Ethan studied the pale arc of light rising in the distance. The crystals seemed thinner, more dispersed, swirling in irregular spirals instead of a smooth curtain. Is it dangerous? He asked. Kayla hesitated, her brow furrowing. Not dangerous, but unpredictable. And unpredictability on this terrain is never ideal. She moved toward the interior console, her fingers gliding across the controls with practiced precision. Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, subtle but unmistakable. What can I do? He asked. Kayla paused, then glanced back at him. Stay near me. If the drift shifts direction, we may need to move quickly. He nodded, stepping beside her. The console lights reflected in her violet eyes, giving them a shimmering depth that made her look almost luminous in the dim shelter glow. Ethan watched her work, sensing the way her breathing tightened with each recalibration. After a long moment, she spoke again. When I first trained for field work, I was told that moments like this are tests, not of skill, but of clarity. You remain steady even when the readings do not. You seem steady now, he said. Kayla gave a soft, almost rueful smile. Only because you are. The admission caught him off guard, warm in its honesty. Outside, the odd drift shimmered again, drawing closer along an unusual angle that brushed the tops of the spires instead of falling vertically. The crystals chimed softly against the stone, each note thin and bright. Kayla stepped forward, watching the pattern. I have never seen this variation before, she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze. The drift did not fall. It hovered, suspended in a gentle arc before drifting sideways like a glowing ribbon stretched across the flats. Is this normal? He asked. No, Kayla said quietly. But it is beautiful. They watched the shimmering arc travel slowly across the horizon, scattering faint glints of light that settled onto the ground like tiny stars. The air inside the shelter warmed just slightly as the unusual formation passed, leaving behind a soft glow that clung to the atmosphere. Kayla turned to Ethan, her expression softened by the gentle light. "When you covered me earlier," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "I did not understand your choice. But now I think I understand a part of it." Ethan waited. Kayla lowered her gaze, her hand pressing lightly over her chest in that same gentle gesture she had offered him before. "You acted because you felt it was right, not because a rule told you to." He nodded. "That is usually how it works. For humans," she said. "Yes." A faint breeze brushed through the shelter entrance, carrying the cool fragrance of crystal dust and the soft hum of the spires still resonating from the passing drift. Kayla stepped closer, her eyes calm but bright with something unspoken. "Ethan," she said quietly, "if the next drift shifts, I will shield you. That is my choice." The sincerity in her voice settled between them like a quiet promise. Not formal, not required. Chosen. Outside, the strange drift dissolved fully into the night, leaving only the soft echo of its luminous trail across the silver-blue sky. The luminous trail from the strange drift faded into the night, leaving the ridge shelter wrapped in a gentle quiet that felt almost suspended in time. Ethan leaned lightly against the curved wall, feeling the soft thrum of the shelter's generators beneath his palm. Kayla stood near the entrance, the insulation wrap still draped around her shoulders, her silhouette outlined by the faint silver glow drifting across the sky. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The calm outside was too rare, too fragile to break without reason. Kayla finally stepped back inside, her steps slow, thoughtful. "The atmosphere is stabilizing," she said softly, glancing at her slate as it updated with smoother lines and balanced readings. "The anomaly has passed." "Good," Ethan replied. "You looked worried for a moment." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Unpredictable patterns remind me of examinations in the academy. You prepare, you predict, and then the system changes, and you must change with it. Some cadets learned quickly, others struggled." She paused, her violet eyes drifting toward him. "I struggled." Ethan lifted his gaze. "Because you wanted to do everything perfectly?" "Yes," she admitted. "Perfection was expected. Anything less was weakness." She lowered the slate, holding it at her side. "But when I saw the drift shift tonight, I did not feel weak. I felt something else. A stillness. I think it came from you." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle gently in the space between them. "Sometimes calm is just knowing you will handle whatever comes," he said. "Or trusting the person next to you." Kayla stepped closer, her expression soft but earnest. "Trust is not easily given in my culture. Even among cadets, we rely on structure, not emotion." "And now?" Ethan asked. She drew a slow breath. "Now I am learning there is value in both." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a delicate whisper across the flats as the mineral spires cooled from the drift's touch. Their once bright glow dimmed to soft, translucent silhouettes. Kayla moved toward the shelter's inner bench and placed the slate down, then sat with her hands loosely folded in her lap. Ethan joined her, leaving a respectful distance, but close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her. She studied her hands for a moment before speaking again. "When I told you earlier that I chose to shield you if needed, I meant it. But there is more you should understand." Ethan waited, steady and patient. "I am not just a trainee," Kayla said gently. "My family holds a position in our governing circle. Expectations for me were shaped long before I chose the academy." She brushed a loose silver strand of hair behind her ear. "Every gesture I make, every word I speak, carries weight. Even my salute earlier, the soft one I gave you, that was not simply a thank you." "What was it?" Ethan asked. Her eyes met his, steady and full of quiet meaning. "It was acknowledgement. A recognition of your character. A gesture reserved for those we trust without command or rank. I have never offered it to anyone outside my people." Ethan felt something warm move through his chest, not dramatic, but grounding. "I did not know," he said softly. "You were not meant to know," she replied. "It is not part of your customs. But I wanted you to understand its meaning now." A gentle hum rolled through the shelter walls as the night breeze shifted again, cool and calm. Kayla looked toward the horizon where the last shimmer of the drift's trail faded into darkness. Ethan, she said quietly, I think meeting you today altered my path more than any atmospheric anomaly could. The sincerity in her voice filled the small space, soft and steady, like a light rising slowly in the dark. Outside, the flats stretched silent and silver, the night cloaking the world in calm as something unspoken settled between them, real and unmistakably bright. The night deepened into a quiet silver calm, the kind that settled slowly across the flats of Telar Five until every spire, every ridge, every grain of crystal dust seemed to hold its breath. Inside the shelter, the soft hum of the generators blended with the stillness, wrapping the small chamber in a steady warmth. Ethan sat near the entrance, watching the faint shimmer where the last echoes of the drifting crystals had disappeared into the dark. Kayla stood beside him, her posture relaxed in a way he had not seen earlier, her silver-blue skin reflecting the dim shelter light like brushed metal touched by moonlight. For a long moment, they simply shared the silence. It was not empty. It carried everything that did not need to be spoken. Kayla finally took a slow step forward, stopping just within the curve of the shelter's threshold. The night air brushed against her face, lifting a loose strand of her shimmering hair. The path back to camp will be clear when dawn comes, she said, her voice soft, almost reverent. Ethan nodded. We should leave early. The currents will shift by mid-morning. She looked back at him, her expression calm but weighted with something deeper. Ethan, there is one more thing you should know before we return. Her hand lifted lightly to her chest, that same gentle gesture she had offered him when he shielded her from the drift earlier. But now, under the quiet glow of the night, it held a different kind of gravity. In my culture, she continued, a soft salute is more than trust. It is a vow, a promise that I will stand with someone, even if our paths are not aligned by rank or duty. Ethan held her gaze, sensing the meaning behind her words, but choosing patience over assumption. She stepped closer, close enough that the soft warmth of the shelter and the cool breath of the night met between them. Today, you changed something in me, Kayla said quietly. Not through instruction or expectation, but through choice. You acted without command, without calculation. You acted because it was right. Her voice lowered, the sincerity in it steady as a heartbeat. Among my people, that is the mark of someone who carries honor in a way no training can teach. Ethan felt a subtle weight settle in his chest, not heavy, but grounding. Kayla, he began, but she shook her head gently, not to silence him, but to finish what she needed to say. I will remember this day, she said, and I will honor it, not with formality, not with rank, but with the same choice you made. She lifted her hand again, pressing her palm softly over her heart, then extended it outward just slightly toward him. Not touching, not demanding, offering. The soft salute. Not formal, not required. Chosen. Ethan rose to his feet, standing fully before her, as the faint silver glow from the horizon cast a quiet outline around them. He did not mirror her gesture, but he stepped close enough that his presence alone became an answer. Kayla lowered her hand, her expression easing into something warm, almost luminous. The wind outside slowed, the flats stretching silent beneath the soft gleam of distant starlight. For a final moment, neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The silence carried the promise clearly. When dawn came, they would walk together, and whatever paths waited beyond. The ridge, the night had already written its own quiet truth between them, shining as softly and steadily as the stars reflected in her eyes.